Didi, Rajamohini Didi?
Yeah, everything good by Gurudev's grace. Janardha Maharaj is much better, and actually his appearance day is coming up on February 5th, so that I believe is a week from this coming Saturday. So
well, thanks for the heads up.
Yeah, and everyone else seems to be doing well. Dina Bandi Prabhu is also mostly well, kind of coming back to life after being out for a couple of weeks with COVID as well.
Okay. He's taken a few knocks over this last year. He's very strong, resilient. Here's Bhakta Kori also joining us. Welcome. Okay, well, maybe we'll just begin. Does anyone? I did have a few questions that were sent in, but I always like to give priority to those who are present here. Does anyone have any special requests for today?
Hi, Dandavad. This morning I was listening a video from Srila Guru Maharaj from 1982, and he was talking about the Vapu and Vani, but he explained it a little different that I used to know. He said that great personalities, what the instructions are considered Vani, what they do is considered Vapu. So he said we should not imitate but follow. So we should go by Vani, not by Vapu. But then after he started talking in that way, he said that sometimes even the instructions in some occasions should not be followed. So those instructions that is Vani should be considered Vapu. He said at the end that it's a little complicated, so I believe so. It's a little confusing, but I never hear about the instruction considered as a Vapu also. They should not be followed in some situations, but I don't know if you know anything about that or anything better than that, because I get a little confused this morning, but I say, I'm not sure. He's confused by himself.
You know, I've contemplated that idea before. So I'm happy to hear that confirmation. I haven't heard that talk of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, but it's something I've thought about, actually. I would like to, maybe you can, if it's handy, maybe you can share the link for that talk in our chat. It would be nice to go and listen. But I can share my own thoughts on that subject matter. I don't know if that's exactly the point that Srila Sridhar Maharaj is making, but I do have some thoughts about that. And first of all, for those who aren't familiar, this is kind of like a bit of an ongoing thing in the Vaishnava discourse. You know, the Vani versus Vapu. Vani meaning the message, and Vapu meaning the form, the body. And so this point is, in our mission, actually, I haven't, in our Chaitanya Saraswat Mat group, I haven't heard that, you know, with those terms, I haven't heard this discussed so much. I've heard it more amongst ISKCON circles. But the point is that we give priority to the message, you know, over the body, you know. Or you could also say, I think the essence of this and what Srila Sridhar Maharaj is speaking about is substance versus form, right? Because if you misapply the Vani, then it becomes Vapu. Because the point being that you have to understand the spirit of what the Vani is, right? You have to understand the spirit of what's being said. Otherwise, if you're applying it indiscriminately, that becomes something formalistic. I feel like I'm not explaining properly, but it's like, okay, let's say like this, like, people joke about Prabhupada said, right? Prabhupada said, or Gurudev said, right? Like you could come up with a long list of Prabhupada saids and Gurudev saids, but if you don't apply them properly, they're not actually relevant. You can quote many things, and you can actually go to hell with that. And I've had that experience, many times with devotees. Well, maybe not so many times, but I've had a few experiences where I've seen that devotees are. I'll give you an example without naming names. One Vaishnava criticizing publicly other Vaishnavas, and I tried to have a reasonable discussion with them to encourage them to stop publishing criticism of other Vaishnavas on Facebook. I thought it was a very reasonable request. And they quoted to me, this is one occasion, this is, kind of a private quote, but there was one occasion where there was one committee of the Gaudiya Math, they were kind of attacking Srila Sridhar Maharaj a little bit and criticizing him and giving their opinion about something he was doing. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj was very frank with them. And he said, I pass urine on the nose of the members of your committee. I pass urine on the nose of the members of your committee. So he was saying, anyone can say what they like, anyone can have whatever opinion they like, but I'm following my Guru Maharaj. I don't care for this committee and that committee and this body and that body and this organization and that organization. I don't care about all that. I care about my Guru Maharaj things. So it's a very strong statement. I pass urine on the nose of the members of your committee, he said. So anyway, this Vaishnava who's been spreading criticism on Facebook, they quoted that in their defense. And this is something that Srila Sridhar Maharaj said in private to a few people. Srila Sridhar Maharaj expressed this privately to a few people, and now this foolish Vaishnava is quoting that and using that as justification for public criticism of senior Vaishnavas. Like how can you compare these two things? You cannot compare. So that's what I was thinking. That when I received that message from this person, that you can quote everything and you can go to hell. You can quote from so many things from our gurus, you can quote from so many scriptures to support your argument. But if you're missing the real spirit, you're not actually getting anything. So that's become Vapu, that's become something formalistic. You're ignoring the real substance, you're ignoring the real spirit. And when I got that reply, I was reminded of one quote of Srila Sridhar Maharaj where he says, the Gaudiya Math is interested in reality, not frame. We are interested in reality. And a lot of the time it actually comes down to just plain common sense, good old common sense. Understanding when and where and how to apply these things. So many things that our gurus say, but we have to understand what is the context. When did he say it? To who did he say it? Why did he say it? Then we can get the inner spirit. Actually, there's one very nice, and thank you, Raswajru, he shared in our chat here. Oh, wait, I've lost these links here. But But now I'm reminded now of one talk of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, where he was saying, maybe later on I can find it, but he was saying that when I go to speak something, I consider the totality of everything that I've heard, you know, from my Guru Maharaj, from the scriptures, from the senior Vaishnavas who I've had association with. You know, I can, when I go like to give my judgment on something or to speak something, I consider all of these things, and then I put them all together, and then I come with my conclusion. You know, but you know, we cannot take one isolated quote, one isolated expression, and apply it outside of context. You know. So that is how I, again, you know, I have to listen to this talk of Srila Sridhar Maharaj, but this is something I thought about too, you know, how the Vani can turn into Vapu, you know, that we can, in the name of following the Vani, in the name of following the message, we're actually following something formalistic, something ritualistic, you know, we're following something that is, you understand what I'm saying, I think. We're not connected with the real spirit, you know, like that simple English expression, let us follow the spirit of the law, not the letter of the law. You know, that I think that kind of boils down to that. So there is the letter, there's the literal word of what was spoken. And then there's understanding the spirit behind that. And only if you understand the spirit behind it, will you be able to apply it properly. Because like, you know, like if I think of Srila Gurudev, and I think Srila Govinda Maharaj is, you know, his example is very helpful in this discussion, because Srila Govinda Maharaj, he was extremely personal in how he gave instruction. And so sometimes he would give contradictory instructions. You know, he to one person he would give one instruction, to another person he would give another instruction. You know, like for example, this is an example I use sometimes. Forgive me if you've heard it before. Bhagavan Prabhu's also joined us, Dandavat Guru, and also Somya Sham and Vijayananda in Ireland are here, Dandavat. But just as a simple example, in regards to the Kadashi, there was a question that came to Gurudev once, you know, is it okay to take chocolate on a Kadashi? And Gurudev said, you know, because, you know, some people argue, oh, chocolate's not a bean, it's actually a fruit. So it's okay to take it, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, you know. And so this goes back to Gurudev, and Gurudev said, actually, that's irrelevant, you know, whether it's a bean or whether it's whether it's technically Ekadashi friendly, that's not the point here. But the point is that chocolate goes against the spirit of Ekadashi. You know, on Ekadashi, we're trying to take simple prasad. You know, that's the point of Ekadashi. We're trying to minimize our own enjoyment and offer more service to Krishna. That's the idea behind Ekadashi. So your whole debate in the technical sphere it's a moot point. Like, it's irrelevant, you know. But understand the spirit here, you know. And from that consideration, it is not suitable for Ekadashi, right? So that was Gurudev's general instruction. But then let's take another scenario. One disciple of Gurudev who comes from a very strict Brahminical background and very attached to the rules and regulations and Brahminical standards, mode of goodness, very attached to all of these things. He's an Indian disciple. And on one occasion, you know, Gurudev made that disciple take chocolate on Ekadashi. because he wanted to break that attachment, you know. So if you don't understand the spirit behind these things, then you'll be puzzled, or you can quote one thing to support your argument on one day, and you can quote the other thing to support your argument on another day. So you have to understand what is the spirit behind that. And the spirit behind that is this principle of niyamagraha, right? This is mentioned in Upadeshamrita, the nectar of instruction, Vaishnav Rupa Goswami, that to be either too attached to the rules and regulations or to be neglectful of the rules and regulations, both are not helpful. We want the middle path. What is the middle path? Krishna Santosh. Like what is what's the real essence? That's what we need to understand. Krishna Santosh means the satisfaction of Krishna. That is what is really the point here. So if we are too lax, if we are too neglectful of the guidelines, that won't help us. But at the same time, if we are overly fixed, on the rules, the guidelines, then we'll lose the spirit. It's not that it's not like the purpose of our practice is to follow rules and regulations. The purpose of our practice is not to check all the boxes and say that we did everything right. The purpose of the practice is that love for Krishna arises within our heart. And there's that expression, and there's that quote, and I think the Upanishads, how does it go? I can't remember right now, but it's saying that to always remember Krishna. This is a famous quote, everyone knows the English. To always remember Krishna and to never forget Krishna. All of the injunctions and the prohibitions, they are servants of these two principles. Sarva Vidi Nisheda Syur. I can't remember the Sanskrit, but that, all of the injunctions and all of the prohibitions, they are servants of these two principles, to always remember Krishna, to never forget Krishna. This is the purpose. So that's the end object. And everything else is subsidiary to that. And that's Gurudev's point. So when you're going to present something to represent the teachings, you have to conflate all of these different comments, and understanding the context and the real spirit and the purpose behind. Otherwise, if you go and tell someone, oh, Gurudev, told so-and-so he had to eat chocolate on Ekadashi, then, you'll overlook what was the real point of that exchange, And similarly, if you become overly forceful in telling someone, oh, Gurudev said, we shouldn't take chocolate on Ekadashi. Why are you taking chocolate on Ekadashi? That's also not representing Gurudev's spirit, So those are my thoughts on that comment of Srila Sridhar Maharaj. What do you think, Prabhu?
Yeah, I think that is the right answer. Actually, we have to follow the spirit of what he's saying, but also sometimes he apply for some specific situation. Maybe it's not applied widely. So that's one of the problems. Some people, they hear something specific and they take it like every time, everywhere, everybody. And that's what they just say is true. No, we have to follow the essence of that. Thank you so much.
Yes, many crazy things can come from that. But sometimes like when I listen to like some of Gurudev's talks or like some videos, like sometimes I'm like surprised at how like I don't know what the word is, but like unconcerned he is actually. Like sometimes he'll say something and I want to put a whole bunch of disclaimers next to that. Right? or I'm like, or like, like I hear Gurudev say, and then I want to put like a footnote, like for everything he's saying. Because I know like this could be interpreted in so many different ways, But then I'm looking at Gurudev and it's like, he doesn't care, like you can just think what you want to think, Like, he was, often he was just unconcerned, like you can draw what you want, like you'll figure it out according to your own sincerity, He wasn't, yeah, I mean, it's interesting actually. It's like he wasn't in a rush to fix us, Like he wasn't in a, like, because I have that tendency. It's like you want to like cram everything in and like, like so people get like the whole picture, like, like a little document, Like sometimes I have that tendency. But with Gurudev, it's like, or like actually with any question, and Gurudev mentioned this too once, with any question, there's so many different channels you can go, right? There's many different directions you can go. And sometimes I'll hear Gurudev answer a question in one way, and he keeps it, he like just keeps it on one track, And it's not that he doesn't know all the other ways, but he's not trying to stuff everything into their brain at once, It's like he's choosing the angle that's suitable for that person at that time, he's not like in a rush to force feed them the absolute truth. And he's also not in a rush to, big himself up and show how much he knows, but he's just, assessing what's suitable or feeling what's suitable for this person at this time and sharing that with them, So, there's a simplicity and a sweetness in that, Yeah, and that mood, it kind of played out in different ways with Gurudev. But like in another way that mood was expressed was like for example like the Chinese devotees gave Gurudev a bottle of rice wine, and he had that up on his shelf, like people might come in there and criticize him for that, this world acharya has a bottle of wine on his shelf. I think like what it comes down to is like Gurudev's emphasis was always on authentic exchange, and he wasn't concerned necessarily about what people might think, but like, these sweet-hearted, simple Chinese devotees, simple-hearted, very new Chinese devotees, they're out of affection, they're giving Gurudev a bottle of wine, rice wine. It's traditional, and he's not drinking it, but he's putting it proudly on his shelf, his front shelf in his front public sitting room, It's it's a reminder, it's his affectionate acceptance of their affectionate gift, and he's not caring what this person might think or that person might think, It's just he's focused on the the authenticity of that exchange, Well, many examples, or like another example. There was in an airport once, I heard this story that somebody gave Gurudev some cookie, and it was like a packaged cookie, and it had some ingredient in it that wasn't strictly pure, and so some simple-hearted devotee gave that to Gurudev. And Gurudev opened the packet and he's about to eat it. And then another devotee came up and whispered in Gurudev's ear, "Oh, Gurudev, I know that cookie, it has such and such in it, you don't want to eat it." And Gurudev looked at that devotee and he said, "Prabhu, I am accepting the affection of this devotee. I'm accepting the affection of this devotee. He wasn't concerned about whether it's pure or impure. He wasn't concerned about what other people might think, but he doesn't want to diminish this genuine affectionate gift from this devotee. That was more important for him. So anyway, this is a little bit on a tangent here. But Mohini, you're gonna say something?
I just wanted to say that I kind of try to remember that this point when new people are coming, and it's very important to try to that maybe they're coming, they don't know many things, but they want to engage, and they naturally want to give something or give some energy or do something, and like seeing that as their heart's enthusiasm to connect with Guru Dev and Guru Garanga. And we have to be very, very careful because we know people are very sensitive. Seems like people are getting more and more sensitive to, anything that you might say, oh, wait, you can't do that, or, oh, wait, you can't offer that, or whatever. But like just remembering that point and just being very gentle with people and trying to, make some allowances for what they may be doing wrong, and see the enthusiasm there, and be very careful to allow that enthusiasm to flow towards Gurudev, because that's the natural current that enthusiasm needs to go. And the form of it may be a little awkward to begin with, but we know that once someone's connected, naturally that's going to become purified and it'll become adjusted and be right and everything. But there was a very beautiful story, and I won't tell it now, but it was with Yudamanyu Prabhu in China. Maybe you know that story, but maybe, well, anyway, I can tell it if you want, but it was something like that they were going to make this offering, and then at the very last moment, like they were having a festival and so many devotees were very excited and they were serving, they were preparing everything. And then like at the very last moment, it was the same kind of thing, like someone like discovered the ingredient, because in China, it's difficult to sometimes find all the right things, but there was that moment where there was like, oh, maybe there's something in here we shouldn't be offering. And Yudamanyu Prabhu had to make that last second moment decision, like, do I smash everything now and make everyone brokenhearted, because they didn't, something like this has come up, or just to take that enthusiasm, that affection and that mood and offer it, and, know that there's this higher thing going on. So anyway, that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you so much for sharing, Braj Mohini. That was wonderful. And Braj Mohini, she's very active in the field of extending the mercy to newcomers. So she really feels the value of that point. Nice. And let's see, Jayadev's also joined us. Sandavad. And Govindanandini, our dear sister in Brazil, is also here. Anyone else want to share any thoughts on what we've been discussing, or propose a new subject? Okay, well, I did, as I mentioned, I did have a few write-in questions. Let's see. So one is actually from Jiva, our dear, beloved, worshipable Jiva Didi, on behalf of a newcomer who has a Christian background. And her question is, I was wondering if you could tell me how devotees pray, because I always start with Dear God and end with Amen, but I think that's Christian. Very sweet question. Well, I mean, I would say that, I mean, we have many prayers. If somebody wants to know how the Vaishnavas pray, then there are many prayers. I don't think you'll find more prayers than what you find in the Vaishnava text. We have so many, starting with our daily Vandana prayers, also in Prapana Jivanamrita is a collection of beautiful prayers. So there are many, many prayers, and we're happy to share that, And we can also say that, Vaishnavism, Krishna consciousness, it's a very specific approach. It's a zoomed in look at the nature of spiritual reality. And so there are prayers, many of the prayers are very specific, specific in the mood, or specific in who they are addressed to. Their prayers to the Vaishnavas, to the saints in general. There are prayers to the Lord in different forms and different avatars. There are also prayers to some of the associates of the Lord. Many of the specific associates, companions of the Lord, parshads, eternal associates of the Lord. So we will find a whole array of different prayers. And so, but then we can add to that essentially prayer is a matter of the heart, and it's something that transcends language. It is true that there are these mantras that have descended from the plane, from a higher plane, that these prayers that have descended from the hearts of these very high, pure souls have particular potency, and just by meditating on them and trying to chant them, we will be benefited, we will be purified, we will be uplifted by that. That is true. Gurudev, he mentioned once about some prayers of Rupa Goswami, one of the great gurus, teachers in our line, that Gurudev said, what has come, from the divine hand of Rupa Goswami, it is not just language. It's not just, fancy Sanskrit language, but, it is a transcendental heart expression. It's a conscious divine expression, and by meditating on that, even if we don't fully understand the meaning, by meditating and praying in a submissive mood, then we will be benefited by that. It's so that connection, it transcends language, it transcends our own understanding even. It's like like think about if you touch a live wire, like you don't need to know how electricity works, but you're going to feel that electricity. You may not know what it is, but if you touch that live wire, you're going to get electrocuted, right? If you stick your finger, into some electric source, you're going to get electrocuted. It doesn't matter whether you know what it is or not, right? So in the same way, if we tap into these divine expressions of these great souls, then we will feel the potency. We will get the effect of that, whether or not we know exactly what it is and what it's about. So that's one thing, that's one point. And then another point I wanted to make is that, our own prayers, they don't have to be couched in a particular framework, of a formulaic prayer. We can simply express our heart, that is also necessary. And we also have so many beautiful songs by our gurus. And one comment that they're expressing the heart of someone, let's say persons like ourselves who are struggling on the path. actually the persons who've written these songs, persons like Bhakti Thakur and Narottam Thakur and others, they are great realized souls. They're not struggling practitioners, but in their humility, they're feeling like that. They're feeling themselves to be in a very lowly position. So they're in their humility, they're expressing themselves like that. But at the same time, they are guiding us and they're helping us to feel what is our own position. Gurudev made a comment like that, about how, their songs are, or like Vrinda expressed it very nicely recently too, a few weeks ago, like they're giving language to our own sentiment and our own position. Like we may not realize our own position, right? Like our own position as conditioned souls in this world. We may not have so much clarity, like, as to how dire, how desperate our situation is. It's like become normalized, dysfunction has become normalized, but these great souls are kind of like shaking us a little bit, like wake up, like look in the mirror, like zoom out, like actually look at what you're living right now. How are you living right now? So they're like showing us like what is the mood of someone who's in this world and who's really conscious of what situation they're in. So those prayers are very helpful for us to meditate on. But also, we also in our own approach towards the Lord and the devotees, we also don't necessarily need, like a formulated prayer. We can express our heart. We can, as we are feeling in our heart, we can express that to the Lord. We can pray to the Lord with what feeling is in our heart. We don't need to have, a specific prayer. And ultimately, that is the most important thing, our own genuine heart call, our own genuine heart necessity. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he made that point once about how in regards to the pronunciation of the Maha Mantra, because someone was asking him, pronounce it this way or pronounce it that way. And Srila Sridhar Maharaj said, this is the correct pronunciation. However, ultimately, that's not what's important, And he gave a very nice example. He said, Mother Jashoda, she may, mistakenly pronounce Krishna's name wrong if she's calling out to him, but he will know what she means. He will know that she's calling for him, it's some, I've been coming back to this point a lot recently. We often forget Krishna's a person, and in one level, we're building a relationship with him in the same way that we might build a relationship with somebody in this world. So like think about like one of your friends, like you're calling out to your friend. Let's say you accidentally get their name a little wrong. They understand you're calling them. Like the point of you pronouncing the name perfectly right, that's not the issue here. The point is that you're having a loving exchange and you're calling out to each other. That's the point. That's the essence of the exchange, So it is the same thing, It's, we, sometimes in spiritual life, it's like we have this mentality of relying on procedures or rituals or, but that's not what it's about, or like this, this ritualistic mentality, do this and get this, but that's not what it's about. It's something much more living and vital and dynamic, like building a relationship. So in one sense, it's as simple as that. So, similarly, our sincere heart call to the Lord and to the Vaishnavas, they will hear that, regardless of the language, regardless of how it's formulated, but that inner heart call, that inner heart necessity, that's what they're hearing, that's what they want. There's also, I'm just reminded also in that song that we sing in the morning, Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Jive Doya Kodi, there's that line there. This describing this, the song is describing the 6 limbs of surrender, right? The 6 limbs of Sharanagati. And then at the end, Bhaktivinoda Thakur, he says, Shadanga Sharanagati Hoi Bejahar Tahara Partana Shune Shri Nanda Kumar. That who can follow these 6 limbs of surrender, their prayer, Nanda Kumar, Krishna, he will hear. Tahara Partana Shune, Nanda Kumar will hear their prayers. So in other words, Bhaktivinoda Thakur is saying that Krishna hears the prayers of the surrendered souls. So what does that tell us? There's a filter system. If your prayer is not made in a mood of surrender, he won't hear it. Somebody else will hear it, or maybe another Krishna will hear it. But that Nanda Kumar, that Krishna of Vrindavan, that Krishna, because there are different Krishnas, right? But that Krishna of Vrindavan, he only hears those prayers, And so if your prayer is made with some other intention, that will be directed to another department. That will be directed to another agent. But Krishna is not interested. So that's what he's hearing, That's what he wants, our genuine mood of surrender, genuine inner spiritual necessity. That's what he hears, it's not a matter of language, Narayani's also joined us. Welcome, dear sister.
Dandavat, Dandavat, Dandavat. Happy to hear all of you today.
Happy to hear you and see you too, Narayani.
Hi.
Visakha, there's a nice
Yes.
part in Revealed Truth that I really liked to read, but in regards to the verses and the words and the meanings and all that. But it's in the chapter titled The Emporium of All Rasa, but there's just a short paragraph. Can I read it real quick? So
Please.
he's quoting this verse of Srila Rupa Goswami from the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and then he's giving a little explanation, and then he says this. Srila Gurudev says, Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhu expressed his vision of Krishna in this verse. It is his own vision. When we hear this verse, we can feel something, maybe 0.1% of Srila Rupa Goswami's divine realization. We cannot actually conceive of it. Srila Rupa Goswami Prabhu can express it, and we can simply try to harmonize with his feelings. So I just like that way that he said it. It gave me it gave me a lot of relief, because a lot of times, with the mind, we're trying to understand and capture something and memorize something and think about something and everything, but there's, he's giving some balm that, by hearing it and just trying to let it enter the feelings coming from that verse, is something other than maybe the form of the words, or like you were saying, there's something more to that, because it's the divine realization of the sadhus and the saints. So that's all.
Nice, thank you, Didi. Yeah, I remember that comment. We can only try to harmonize with his feelings. Very charming expression. see, Krishna Mohini Didi has also joined us from Spain. Any Dandavat. Anyone else want to share anything or any short question? I have another question that was sent in, but I don't know if we have enough time. I think I might want to spend a bit more time on it. It's an in-depth subject matter. Chintamani, you look like you want to say something.
No, I was just turning my camera on to be polite because I know that you like to have the devotees camera on. And of course, I want to show you that we're at the Ananda veranda still.
Okay, cool. Yeah, it's always very encouraging to see the faces of the Vaishnavas. Gurudev, he mentioned how it's in Hari Bhakti Vilas, I can't remember, but like different ways by which you can know who is a Vaishnava. And one of the points was someone who's happy when they see other Vaishnavas, or who the Vaishnavas are happy to see, So I was thinking, I'm not like a real Vaishnava, but the fact that I'm happy to see Vaishnavas, that must be a good sign. That must count for something.
We are always happy to see you, Visakha.
Okay, well, if no one has anything, maybe I will just go to this question then, and we'll see. We can always continue next week if it goes too long. This is a devotee in Tijuana, and let's see. Somebody mentioned something to her about how devotees, sometimes devotees are physically living inside the temple, but their mind is outside of the temple. And so she was concerned, how can we live inside the temple and serve in every way the guru, his devotees, and the temple? Because it sounds like she's decided to live in the temple, so she's worried she'll go down the wrong track. How to ignore the mind and be able to reside there without disturbance. I've also seen several devotees who serve for years, and then out of the blue they leave and don't come back, or they walk away from the movement. Some come back after a while and others don't. How to be constant, how to create the service discipline without giving up, how to get to death serving 24 hours. She's got a lot of passion. I think what it comes down to is that we have to follow the genuine current of Krishna consciousness. We have to be we have to be awake to serve a genuine service necessity. Srila Sridhar Maharshi, because there's the genuine current of Krishna consciousness. It's not just a philosophy. It's not a way of life. It's not just a way of life. It's not just a culture. It is all of those things, but it's not limited to that. It's not just a philosophy. It's not just a way of life. It's not just a culture. But it's actually reality. And that was the answer that Srila Sridhar Maharaj gave when he asked a group of devotees, he surprised a group of devotees and asked them, because they're asking him so many questions. And then he said, let me ask you a question. What is Krishna consciousness? And they fumbled for some different answers. And then Srila Sridhar Maharaj, he said, it is reality. And it is time that you are acquainted with it. So that's what we have to remember. We're actually approaching the real foundation of reality. So that means we're approaching something that is going to reciprocate with us. It's something living. It's something that's going to engage with us. So we have to be awake to that. And we have to cooperate with that. We have to try to go with that program, not our program. And that entails the die to live spirit. So this is probably the prerequisite for authentic. Oh, okay, here we're talking about living in a temple, but actually it's just Vaishnava life, in a broad sense. But since the question is about living in the temple, we'll speak in that context. This is the prerequisite for anyone who wants to live in the temple, in a Krishna conscious temple. They have to embrace the die to live principle, which means that when the higher reality comes at you, when the higher agenda, let's put it like this, when the higher agenda comes at you, you have to be ready to embrace it, even at the expense at your own lower agenda. We have our own idea of what's going on, we have our own concocted idea of what's going on. We've got our own lower agenda, and then there's the higher agenda. So when the higher agenda comes down upon us, we have to throw away our lower agenda and embrace the higher agenda. And in order to do that, we have to embrace this die to live principle. We have mixed feelings about Mahatma Gandhi, and we know Srila Swami Maharaj Prabhupada was, quite, unhappy about certain things regarding Mahatma Gandhi. But one point Srila Sridhar Maharaj mentioned about him is he said he had this do or die spirit, that, whatever he said, he was ready to follow through with to the death if necessary, at every moment, and there were times when he risked his life, for his cause. So of course, we're not talking about anything physical here, but we're talking about spirit, and we're talking about the ego, giving up of the ego, not the body, but that spirit is what we're talking about. So this is what it comes down to, and this is what will determine whether we're successful in Krishna consciousness or not. How much are we able to embrace the die to live principle? That the higher version of reality comes in clash with our lower version of reality, and we give it up. We give our lower version and we embrace the higher version. That's what it comes down to. Because if we can do that, then we will remain connected with reality. And if we're connected with reality, then we'll be able to continue in Krishna consciousness. But if we, on the other hand, if we impose our own lower agenda, if we impose our own lower agenda upon the higher reality, then that's some level of offense there, and then our, Krishna Kanta Didi, she put this in Italy, she put this very nicely once, how, when we're living like that, in that spirit of die to live, it's like a fire. Srila Sridhar Maharaj also talks about the fire of self-sacrifice. So if we are living like that, that creates fire. There's this fire of sacrifice that's created. And in that fire, all of our lower material attachments, material ideas, they will burn up. They'll dissolve, they'll disappear, they'll be destroyed. Oh, sorry, Sevarupa, I see your hand is raised. I'll just finish this thought and I'll come back to you. So if that fire is burning, and that's only created by the spirit of sacrifice, then our lower issues will be destroyed, you know. But if we are not creating this fire, if we're not living in this fire of sacrifice, then those lower tendencies will remain very strong within us, and eventually they'll take us away. So that's what we have to be awake to, you know. Are we really staying awake to the real descent, the real current of reality, the beautiful, you know, or not? So, am I ready to give up my ego in particular circumstances? You know, am I ready to give up my own comfort in particular circumstances? We have to be, you know, in school, you know when you have an exam, right? But Krishna consciousness, it's reality. So it's not like it's not just an examination of your knowledge, but it's an examination of your heart. So those like pop quizzes, you say in America, like these pop quizzes, they'll come up all the time, you know, and they're actually opportunities for us to progress. So we have to be awake. We have to be alert to that. Sevarupa Didi, please. You wanted to say something.
Dhanavad. I was listening to a class this morning, and in this piece, they were reading, and it seemed to just culminate with what you've been saying in the class and the questions and that, but it's from Loving Search for the Lost Servant, the part with I think it's called Brahma's Illusion. So I just wanted to read that bit, which is just called Beyond Experience. So it says here, I asked Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Prabhupada about the difference between Rupa and Sanatan. He simply said it is adoksaja, beyond our understanding. So Krishna Leela is ununderstandable. Everything is not bound to come within our fist. The Supreme Lord has all rights reserved. This must be understood if we at all want to be in connection with that plane of reality. And then it goes on, okay, so in Srimad Bhagavatam, it says, I'm not going to pronounce the Sanskrit part, but it is a defect to want to understand everything about divinity. Knowledge may be a qualification here in this world, but in relation to the transcendental truth of the highest order, the tendency to want to know everything is a disqualification. We want to know the value of everything. We want to have the key to everything in our possession, but this is really a bar to progress. If we assert ourselves in this way, we rather lose that confidence we might have in divinity, and there will be some delay in extending the key to us. And then the example here is if a servant, upon getting employment in the master's house, is very eager to be entrusted with the house keys, then the master will suspect him. So to want to know everything is a type of disease. It is an enemy to our progress. This is, of course, difficult to accept, but still it is true. Surrender is everything. What cultivation of knowledge do we find in the gopis, the most exalted devotees of Krishna? What was their acquaintance with scripture? Nothing. What we understand to be standard purity, what we think to be knowledge, all these things are disqualifications in giving pleasure to the absolute. An example of how this misconceived standards of purity and chastity are a disqualification can be seen in the following story. And then the next story is called The Mystic Physician, about when Krishna, acts and becomes ill, or one of his leelas, and then he also becomes the doctor and says, oh, a chaste lady has to get some water for me from the Yamuna with this pot that is filled with holes, or porous pot. So I thought that was really nice and apt to what you were discussing about surrender. And it's just was like, even though you don't know or feel disqualified, or you don't know everything and you want to, it's like that's the basis for this world, wanting to have to gain knowledge and gain experience. But like you're saying, in what we're coming to in Krishna consciousness, it's all about heart and getting in touch and surrender. So yeah, I just thought of sharing that because it came to mind.
Thank you very much for sharing, Seva. A beautiful quote. Beautiful quote from a very beautiful book, Loving Search for the Lost Servant. And Tunga Rasa has also just shared a really wonderful quote from a divine servitor. Oh no, sorry, Dignity of the Divine Servitor. I'll just read that out. It's really nice. Srila Guru Maharaj said, Jai Sankirtan Agni Prajwalita Kuriyachan. All over the world, Srila Guru Maharaj arranged the fire sacrifice of Sankirtan, and we are the ingredients to fuel the flames of that fire. But if we hide from there, then that is not real saving, but that is suiciding. That is, everything is transcendentally arranged there, and therefore we cannot feel the burning sensation. Only we can feel the transcendental joyful nourishment of the mood of sacrifice. And what is this fire of sacrifice? Srimad Bhagavat also says, Yagnai Sankirtana Prayer Yajanti. We should perform worship of the yagya of Sankirtan. The real fire of yagya is not a fire that burns visibly. It is a fire that burns our karma. And through that, heavenly feelings arise within us. Bhakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami. Beautiful. Ananda Srupani has also joined us from UK. Welcome. I'll just Dandavat. Well, I think we can wrap things up, but just going back to the original question we had, just to conclude, the main point I was trying to make there is that, we all come, I was speaking, I think, in a bit of an abstract way, but the sum and substance I wanted to say is that, we come to Krishna consciousness with all of our baggage, right? That baggage being our material conceptions or material misconceptions. And those misconceptions, they will be removed in the fire of self-sacrifice, in the fire of service. But if we're not connecting with that current, that service current, the real service current, then those misconceptions will not be cleaned away. If they're not cleaned away, then they will eventually begin to, dominate within us, and that will take us away from Krishna consciousness. That's one point. And another point is that we have to nourish our taste for the real thing. We have to nourish our taste for the real thing. And the real thing essentially is kirtan, Hari Katha. This quote is very it was a reminder of that for me, that this, what essentially are, because this is another problem that can come up sometimes in temples, is that, like the running of the temple, the maintenance, getting the job done, that can start to become a distraction from the purpose of the temple. It's a challenge that every temple faces, being able to maintain the temple so you can keep nourishing the taste of devotees, right? That's the challenge, because the problem is that one can get the upper hand over the other. And if you do that, then you lose the real purpose of the temple in the first place. So, it's a collective issue. It's also an individual issue. It's an individual challenge, that in the temple, we have that challenge of keeping that cultivation of the taste, of the sweetness, not letting the outer things take the upper hand, because otherwise our spiritual, what was spiritual can become something material. It can start to become a material endeavor. It can become just about, paying the bills or getting this service done or that service done. And that's why it's important that we nourish our taste by, doing the kirtan, hearing the harikatha, hearing the classes, having association, reminding us, like, it's not just about doing the service, but it's about how we do the service and why we're doing the service. So if we're like, we need to plug in, keep ourselves plugged in to that, keep that hunger, that spiritual hunger alive within us. That will keep us on track. That will keep us on track. So yeah, I don't need to go into too many details, but it's an issue that we see, and we sometimes see in temples, there's friction between those who are just trying to pay the bills and those who want to do kirtan, and sometimes those who are trying to pay the bills, they forget about, the real spirit behind everything that we're doing, and they forget that taste for kirtan. So that's another important thing, and that's something that will also, keeping that taste alive is also something that will sustain us, keep us going over a long period of time. Okay, well, maybe I'll stop there. Anyone else want to share any final thoughts or quotes or anything? Vajramohini, Didi, any final words?
Well, I can just say real quick, just as a reminder, living in the temple, we always have ample opportunity to practice Gurudev's instructions of humility, tolerance, and giving honor to others. And he was giving that for us, for our benefit, because he knew it's going to be tough. So, and it applies in every situation to everyone living anywhere, but somehow in the temple, things are a little more intensified. So, we want everybody around us to be perfect, and we want to be perfect or whatever, but we're going to have lots of chances to practice those things. So that was what I wanted to say. Thank you.
We're talking about the fire of Krishna consciousness. Vajramohini is living in the middle of that fire right now.
It's very odd. It's very odd because we find, like, there's the part of you that prays, dear Lord, give me service, connect me, accept me and connect me. And then there's the other part that when that service comes, it tries to run away. So it's lots of little interesting ways of seeing our little tricks, our internal tricks. So the purification is burning away so many layers, so we can see those little tricky parts of ourselves that we hope can also be purified. So anyway, it's a great experience.
Jai Shabakti Sundar Govinda Dev Goswami Maharaj ki Jai. All the assembled devotees ki Jai. Jai Shri Harinam Sankirtan ki Jai. Jai
Jai.
Gaur Premanande. Oh.
Jai Visakha Didi ki Jai.
Jai.
Jai devotees
Dandavad.
ki Jai. Dandavad.
Jai. Dandavad. Jai Krishna.
Yes.